Okay, the last section we're going to look at here in Christianity and the Crisis of Cultures is supernatural faith and its origins. So Pope Benedict here is going to try to make the point that the way that we have faith in God, or the way that we know God, isn't that much different in some ways than the way that we know or have faith in anything else. But he's also going to point out it is quite different in other ways. So if you look at this first full paragraph on the right-hand side of page 39, he's talking about the way that we know anything, right? He's saying we know God in a similar way that we know the way that we know other things. If you remember, we talked about three components of what we call knowledge, or a working faith in our everyday life, right? And we talked about cell phones. And we said the first thing is faith in the experts, faith that someone really knows how these things work, and then faith in other people's belief in their explanations, and then finally my own experience, that the things that I experience in life fit with it, right? I can see when I go to a place that is hidden by a mountain or something, when I'm in a valley with no transmitters around, I don't get cell phone coverage. So yeah, that makes sense given the way that people told me how cell phones work. So there's the three elements of faith in everyday life, or knowledge, as I summarized it. So you have faith that someone else knows what they're talking about, faith in the competence of everybody else that believes it, and then a correspondence to your own personal experience. And with God, with knowledge of God, it kind of works the same way. Okay, this second full paragraph on the same page is going to talk about how the knowledge of God, faith in God, is different from the faith and knowledge that we have for other things in everyday life. So when it comes to God, just like with other everyday beliefs, we do rely on the experience of others, right? We do here, for example, in Christianity, we do have the faith of the apostles, which is passed down to us. Someone shared it with us, our family members, a neighbor, a friend, someone brought it to us, right? And then we do see the other members of our community believing it too. And we see it, and we say, wow, this does seem to be a viable reality. There does seem to be something to this. And then we have our own personal experiences that fit with that. The difference is that when it comes to faith in God, we don't just trust the other person's expertise, right? We don't just trust the expert. We also see that we can be the expert in a certain way, right? As Pope Benedict says in this second sentence in the box there, the voice of the eternal can reach me through the mediator of the other person only if there is in me an organ capable of receiving it. So there's an acknowledgement that this God that this person knows, that this other person has had this deep experience of, that I also know them somehow, and I also can have this deep experience of God too. So the participation, the faith in the experts, is a faith that you too can be an expert, right? You can know God like the apostles knew God. So at the end of page 39, in the beginning of the next page, Ratzinger goes on to talk about the way that this faith in the experts here, faith in the validation from the community of believers, that it's more than just kind of an intellectual assent. It is a very openness and heart to sharing in their experience of the reality of God. It's the openness to the belief that you can also experience God in the way that, in our case, the apostles experienced God, right? You can share in that experience. You can become an expert yourself. And he talks about doing this in silence and recollection. So he's acknowledging that the great faith traditions, in particular Christianity here, include the idea that each person can be a saint, right? Each person can experience what we talked about before as liberation, salvation, or enlightenment, right? As he says here, that there exists a direct access to the Creator for each one of us, right? So it's a little bit different, because in the faith of things in the everyday world, like electricity, I'm never going to become an electrical engineer. You know, at least I don't have a plan to do that. You know, some of you might be doing that, and that's great. But there's things in life that we can know about without becoming an expert, and not really caring to become an expert. But when we take on a shared faith in God, we're saying, yeah, we're all going to that goal. We're all going towards union with God, liberation, salvation, enlightenment, however we talk about it. So that's his final point, that there is a kind of a unity between the faith, the experience of the experts, and the personal validation, our personal experience in the believer when it comes to God. But again, this doesn't mean that God is disclosing himself to one person and not others. It's not an isolated case. The sharing that God does with the human beings, with a particular human being, is always in the context of a greater sharing with all his people and all his creation.